There comes a moment when the body simply cannot go on, when the eyes close on their own, and the prayer that once lingered on the lips dissolves into silence. Many call this distraction, weakness, even failure. But is it really? Padre Pio said, "The rosary is the weapon of our times, but it is also the rest of the trusting soul." And this makes me wonder if what we call weakness might actually be a sign of such pure trust that we can't even control it. How many times have you felt guilty for falling asleep during prayer? The mind immediately starts judging, "I failed. I couldn't stay strong." But does the Father really see you that way? Or does he see something your own eyes have yet to recognize? Jesus, in Gethsemane, asked for watchfulness, it's true. He asked his disciples to stay awake with him, but he also said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." There is, it seems, a mysterious space between struggle and rest, between vigilance and the Father's embrace. And perhaps it is precisely in that space that sleep arrives. Because between carrying the cross and resting in God's arms, we are called to live this tension. The body, limited, gives in to fatigue. But the soul, even in silence, continues to speak, to seek, to move toward the Creator. It's a mystery hard to understand, yet profoundly beautiful. Prayer is not lost when the body sleeps. So I ask myself, and I invite you to ask yourself, could falling asleep while praying be not an act of weakness, but the simplest expression of trust? Like a child fighting sleep only to finally surrender in a mother's arms. Could it be that, when we fall asleep in prayer, we are exactly surrendering as children in the Father's embrace? Perhaps the mystery lies there, at the point where we can no longer control, yet remain in His presence. This is where the path I want to walk with you begins, a path of discovery, of acceptance, of healing. Falling asleep during prayer need not be a burden, need not bring shame. It can be a sign. It can be a mirror. It can, perhaps, even be an invitation. There is a voice that often follows us in silence. It whispers in the depths of our conscience every time we feel we haven't done enough, every time we believe we've failed before God. When we fall asleep in prayer, this voice often grows harsher, almost accusatory. You lack discipline. You're not strong enough. You didn't respect the moment of prayer. This self-criticism weighs more than the sleep itself. It weighs because it turns a human gesture into spiritual shame. Yet Padre Pio reminded us of something simple, yet liberating. God does not cling only to execution. He first looks at intention. He sees the root that moved the act, not merely the way it ended. That means even when our eyes close, if the heart began the prayer with true love, God receives that gesture. The enemy, however, knows how to exploit the gap of guilt. He turns rest into accusation. He twists what is human, making what could be a sign of trust and the body's natural limit seem like mortal weakness. It's striking how excessive guilt brings no one closer to the Creator. On the contrary, it breeds spiritual anxiety, that feeling of never being good enough, of always disappointing. It's like trying to pray with a stone on your chest. Love cannot flow because the mind is busy with judgment. It is at this point that God's silence feels farthest away, not because He has withdrawn, but because we have built an internal barrier of self-criticism. Perhaps the error is not in falling asleep, but in judging that moment harshly. Perhaps the real obstacle is not sleep, but the cruel demands we carry within. There is a vast difference between spiritual vigilance and spiritual perfectionism. The first comes from love, remaining alert to God. The second arises from pride in disguise, insisting on measuring itself by its own standards. Here is where we need healing, to accept that, before God, even our limits can become prayer. There comes a moment in prayer when the body seems ready to give up, but the soul endures. It is in that instant that sleep ceases to be mere fatigue and transforms into metaphor. To sleep in the Father's arms is, indeed, like a child surrendering without fear into a mother's embrace. There is no resistance, no demand. There is only trust and surrender. A simple gesture, yet full of depth. Even when the muscles relax, the heart remains awake, connected to the divine. Padre Pio often said that prayer is the thread that links us to heaven. This thin, invisible thread does not break when the eyes close. It remains, silent and firm, allowing the soul to continue walking toward God, even without the body's conscious participation. It is as if physical surrender to rest paradoxically intensifies spiritual presence. The Bible offers images reflecting this same reality. Jesus sleeping in the boat during the storm shows us that rest is not a lack of faith, but absolute trust. He trusted that the Father would take care of everything, even when it seemed all control was lost. This deep rest reveals complete surrender. Sleeping during prayer, in this sense, is not a sign of abandonment or weakness, but a surrender that transcends conscious effort, a surrender flowing directly from a trusting heart. The mystery lies in the subtlety of this gesture. The body yields, yet the soul endures. And it is precisely this silent endurance that connects us to the infinite, reminding us that prayer does not rely solely on constant vigilance, but also on the ability to surrender, to trust, to rest in the arms of the one who loves us unconditionally. It is in this balance that sleep becomes the language of the soul, a quiet dialect of trust that needs no words. Not all sleep during prayer comes from genuine surrender. Sometimes it arises as a subtle escape, an unconscious refuge shielding us from confronting the depth of the moment. Prayer, which should be an encounter and dialogue, can become an emotional pillow, a way to avoid facing what unsettles us within. It is as if we seek the Father's embrace while simultaneously resisting His gaze upon our deepest wounds. The danger is turning the sacred into anesthesia, repeating words without presence, murmuring prayers while the mind drifts, letting the body fall asleep while the heart hides. Within that apparent silence can lie an attempt to escape what hurts, what must be faced, what requires courage to remain awake before God. A gesture that seemed like trust may, in truth, be resistance. Discernment here is delicate. We must look inward with honesty and gentleness, noticing whether sleep arises from childlike trust or a refusal to stay attentive. There is a subtle, almost imperceptible difference between resting in the Father's arms and letting sleep mask our spiritual vigilance. Recognizing this boundary without guilt is an act of love for oneself and for God, a way of learning to distinguish surrender from escape, real presence from disguised absence. Deep down, this awareness invites us to remain attentive without anxiety. True surrender does not fear fatigue, yet it does not hide from it. Sleep that comes from trust opens space for encounter with the divine. Sleep that masks resistance alerts us to look tenderly at the parts of ourselves that still need to awaken, at the shadows that need light, at the courage to stay whole in prayer, even when the body insists on yielding. Subtle forces infiltrate our daily lives without our noticing, and often sudden sleep during prayer is one of them. Padre Pio warned of the silent workings of the enemy, who knows how to exploit our smallest distractions, turning moments of rest into opportunities for spiritual deviation. The body relaxes, the mind drifts, and before we know it, the focus meant to remain steady in dialogue with God is lost. This reality should not be met with fear, but with awareness. There is a fine line between holy rest and sleep that distances us from God's presence. Physical fatigue, when accompanied by true intention, can be sacred. But when it becomes a pattern, when we fall asleep at the same time or in an automatic way, it calls for reflection. Is it the body asking for rest, or the spirit losing focus? Noticing these moments requires delicacy, inner observation, and honesty with oneself. It is not about demonizing sleep, but recognizing the potential in each moment of prayer to strengthen us. Between the body that yields and the spirit that must remain alert lies a point of balance inviting presence, awareness, and attentiveness. And this quiet attention is what keeps prayer alive, even when everything around us seems determined to distract. Thus, sleep is not necessarily the enemy, but it is not neutral either. It can reveal hidden patterns, subtle traps that divert the soul. By recognizing them with compassion, we allow vigilance to remain, letting each moment of prayer, even accompanied by fatigue, become a bridge to the Father. Even when the eyes close and the lips fall silent, something inside us continues to move. St. Augustine said, "Desire always prays." This resonates deeply when we feel sleep approaching during prayer. Because even asleep, when the intention was true, the soul does not abandon the Father's presence. The heart remains in silent dialogue, breathing trust and love. Padre Pio emphasized that an Ave Maria prayed with attention and love is worth more than thousands of words repeated without presence. It is the quality of surrender that matters, not the quantity of prayers said. Even when the body fails, the soul can continue the journey, silent, yet intense. Sleep does not erase prayer, it transforms it into something deeper, more intimate, more connected to the mystery of surrender. Recognizing this is liberating. It allows every gesture, every word, every moment of fatigue to be embraced as part of the spiritual experience. We discover that vigilance depends not only on posture or full attention, but on the sincerity of the heart. Even in moments of apparent rest, the thread linking us to heaven remains firm. It is in this silent space that the body rests and the spirit continues its prayer, reminding us that God's presence is measured not by effort, but by the love that pulses within us. Here is a simple practice to transform sleep into prayer. Before beginning, there is a subtle moment of surrender that can shape the entire experience. A silent declaration to the Lord, an inner sigh, "If I fall asleep, let it be in you." That alone, simple yet full of intention, allows the heart to remain connected even as the body seeks rest. It is like lighting an inner flame that continues to shine when the darkness of sleep approaches. Choosing a clear and simple intention deepens the experience. When the mind knows where to direct the heart, even moments of fatigue become a quiet dialogue with God. Some people find balance by alternating postures, standing, walking, or subtly changing the rhythm of prayer. Each physical gesture becomes a bridge between body and soul, maintaining vigilance without tension, without excessive effort. Even if sleep arrives, there is a way back. Upon waking, a brief moment of gratitude, a word acknowledging what happened, dissolves any shadow of guilt. This simple act reinforces surrender, strengthens trust, and shows that rest is not interruption, but continuity. Transforming sleep into prayer is learning to inhabit each moment with love, allowing the heart to remain awake even as the body finds repose. Sometimes the fatigue that brings sleep during prayer is not only physical but spiritual. It may quietly reflect unhealed wounds, pain stored in the heart that shy away from God's attentive gaze. The body yields and the spirit retreats, not from laziness, but from fear of confronting what hurts, what still needs tender care. In this sense, sleep becomes a thermometer of the soul. It reveals the need for inner healing, showing the burdens we carry that we may not yet have the courage to name. Padre Pio welcomed those who arrived weary, worn, wounded by life and sin, reminding them that Jesus can turn tears into pearls. Each yawn, each moment of drowsiness during prayer, can be a gentle invitation to entrust our burdens to the Father, allowing Him to transform fatigue into true rest. Recognizing these wounds requires sensitivity and honesty with oneself. It is not condemnation, but acknowledgement, a moment of introspection guiding us to care deeply for our own hearts. Sleep during prayer, understood this way, ceases to be merely physical and becomes a bridge between vulnerability and healing, between surrender and transformation. It is in this silent space that the soul begins to free itself, learning that even rest can be prayer and that each moment of repose can carry the strength of a profound encounter with God. The Rosary holds this unique power to unite effort and rest, struggle and surrender. Padre Pio prayed dozens of rosaries daily, and even when his body seemed tired, he continued. For him, prayer was not an obligation but a continuous breath, a discipline that sustained the soul while offering deep rest. Each Hail Mary, each mystery, was a delicate thread connecting the human to the divine, allowing constancy to shape the heart even amid fatigue. There is something therapeutic in this rhythm of prayer. The body may fail, the eyes may close, but the discipline of daily practice creates a solid foundation that keeps the soul connected, even in the quietest hours. The Rosary becomes a refuge, a space of surrender where spiritual vigilance finds rest. It teaches that it is not perfection that draws us closer to God, but constancy, silent faithfulness, repetition infused with intention and love. Seeing the rosary this way transforms the act of prayer. It ceases to be just repeated words and becomes rhythm, breath, presence. Even when the body yields, the soul remains awake, connected, nourished by the constancy of the encounter. In this delicate balance, the rosary reveals itself not only as a spiritual weapon but also as rest for the faithful soul, a bridge between vigilance and surrender, between human effort and divine grace. Even when the body gives way and the muscles relax, there is an invisible rhythm that continues to pulse, the breath of the soul. Every sigh filled with intention is a silent prayer, even if unnoticed. A subtle energy runs through every cell, connecting the physical to the spiritual, transforming rest into presence. It is as if, while the body sleeps, the soul remains awake, sustaining dialogue with God even in the absence of words or conscious movement. To sleep while praying is, in this sense, learning to feel prayer in every heartbeat, realizing that the entire body participates in this silent encounter. Physical fatigue is not an obstacle but a partner of the soul. It creates a delicate harmony between rest and surrender, allowing every cell to breathe trust and love, even without conscious action. When we notice this inner rhythm, every moment of sleep becomes continuous prayer. It is not a pause but an extension of surrender. The body rests, yet the soul remains awake, gathering every gesture of faith and intention like silent pearls before the Father. Sleeping while praying reveals that spiritual vigilance can exist even in the stillness of the body, in a deep connection that transcends physical limits. Sleep brings a profound silence, unlike any we know while awake. It allows the soul to meet the Father's presence, free from distractions and noise that normally pull us away. When the eyes close, worries fade, and a delicate, quiet intimacy emerges, where the heart can hear God's whisper without hurry, without demand. In this space, every moment becomes one of deep listening, inner connection. Silence asks for no effort, demands no performance. It embraces and enfolds, drawing the spirit closer to the Creator gently, almost imperceptibly, yet intensely. Even asleep, we can feel this presence, surrounding every breath, every involuntary movement, transforming rest into silent dialogue with the Father. Learning to inhabit this silence is discovering that prayer is not limited to words or conscious gestures. It teaches us that the surrender of the heart, even in moments of fatigue, creates an invisible yet powerful communication with God. Sleep ceases to be absence and becomes presence, a safe space where the soul rests while remaining awake in the Father's love. Every Hail Mary, every intention offered, is not lost when the body tires. The thread that binds us to heaven remains firm, invisible, and continuous. Even as we fall asleep, prayer continues silently, like a current that never stops. This understanding transforms sleep into an act of surrender and ongoing presence, showing that vigilance and spiritual connection do not rely solely on conscious effort. The body may yield, but the soul remains connected. Physical rest does not break the dialogue with God. Rather, it strengthens trust and allows prayer to grow deeper and more interior. Every moment of drowsiness or yawn is absorbed by the heart as an expression of surrender, creating a space where love and faith flow freely. When we grasp sleep in this way, we realize that prayer is not measured by wakefulness. Sleeping while praying reveals that spiritual vigilance and the surrender of the heart can coexist, allowing the spirit to remain awake in communion with the Father even as the body rests. It proves that true prayer depends not on watchfulness alone, but on the constant love dwelling within the soul. When the body grows weary and the mind drifts, we are confronted with our own fragility. It is at this human limit that trust in God is strengthened. Falling asleep while praying reveals that we cannot carry everything alone, that there are moments when surrender is more powerful than effort, and that acknowledging our limitations is, paradoxically, an act of faith. Every yawn, every relaxation of the muscles, is a silent reminder that there is a safe embrace that holds us, even when we feel our strength has reached its limit. Physical weakness then becomes an opportunity for surrender. It teaches us that we do not need to control everything, nor bear the weight of life or prayer alone. Sleeping during prayer is not a failure, but an acknowledgement that there is a love surrounding us, greater than our capacities. This quiet surrender shows that true trust does not come from strength, but from the courage to admit that we need the Father's care, allowing Him to guide what is beyond our reach. This trust, cultivated in fragility, is deep and transformative. Every moment of sleep during prayer becomes a gesture of faith, a silent link with God that deepens intimacy with Him. It is not about escaping or taking the easy way out, but about allowing the heart to open fully, aware that even in vulnerability there is infinite protection, support, and love. It is in this delicate, silent space that the spirit learns to rest and trust, making the act of sleeping while praying a true sign of surrender and deep devotion. In fragility also arises the awareness that every human effort is limited, but divine grace is infinite. The body that falls asleep does not cancel the prayer, nor diminish the value of the intention. On the contrary, vulnerability places us in a position to receive, to open space for God to act in our hearts, tending our wounds and strengthening our faith. It is a silent lesson in humility, teaching us to cherish every gesture of surrender as an act of spiritual courage. Finally, understanding that trust blooms in fragility frees us from the weight of self-criticism. We can acknowledge our limitations without guilt, embrace fatigue as part of the journey, and recognize that every moment of surrender, even in sleep, is a gesture of love rising to the Father. Fragility ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a bridge, a silent bridge connecting the human to the divine, reminding us that true strength lies in full trust and the sincere surrender of the heart. Falling asleep during prayer need not be a source of guilt or judgment. Padre Pio said, "Pray, wait, and do not worry. Worry is useless." Every moment when the body yields and the mind grows quiet can be a profound gesture of trust. It is as if, by closing our eyes, we surrender not just the body, but the entire soul, allowing the Father to embrace every fragment of us with tenderness and care. This sleep is not weakness. It is the silent expression of one who yields to the divine presence, trusting that every sigh and every heartbeat remains in God's hands. Often we think that prayer must be visible, that it requires spoken words or deliberate gestures to be real. Yet there exists an invisible, silent dimension where the heart speaks without sound, and the soul remains connected to God even in the absence of physical action. Falling asleep while praying reveals precisely this dimension. Every yawn, every relaxation of the body, every moment of sleep carries the potential for surrender. It is as if the heart continues its dialogue even when the mind quiets, and the soul maintains its presence before the Father, expressing fidelity and trust without a word. In this silent state, we learn that prayer is not measured by the movement of the lips, posture, or the time spent. There is an invisible current linking our spirit to heaven, continuous, silent, and steadfast, persisting even when the body yields to exhaustion. This silent surrender teaches us that we do not need to control every thought or gesture for our prayer to matter. Simply remaining open, even in the body's torpor, demonstrates humility and recognition that God welcomes every fragment of our being. Each sigh, each slight shift of posture, each moment of physical relaxation is a sign of trust and surrender. It is in this delicate space that intimacy with the Father deepens, showing that prayer is not limited to conscious vigilance but manifests also in quiet presence, in silent intention that does not falter. Understanding this frees us from guilt, self-criticism, and fear of inadequacy, inviting us to see that even the smallest gestures carry value in God's eyes. When we embrace this silent surrender, we realize that spiritual vigilance does not depend on constant effort or conscious attention. The body may fall asleep, but the soul remains awake, connected, and nourished by divine presence. Every moment of sleep becomes an opportunity for silent communion, where trust and love are fully expressed. The heart's invisible surrender becomes a sacred bridge, linking the human to the divine, reminding us that God perceives every act of trust, even those unseen. This recognition transforms each moment of rest into continuous, meaningful prayer, showing that true spiritual vigilance resides in the surrendered heart, not only in open eyes. Sleep during prayer can be understood not as interruption, but as a sacred moment of spiritual strengthening. When the body allows itself to yield, the soul finds space to expand, reconnecting with God in a deep and silent way. Each moment of physical torpor offers an opportunity for divine energy to flow, renewing strength, easing tension, and deepening intimacy with the Father. Physical rest becomes a bridge to spiritual rest, turning each yawn or relaxation into an act of continuous faith, where silent surrender becomes as powerful as spoken words or conscious gestures. In this silence, the soul learns to trust, understanding that vigilance does not rely solely on human effort and that divine presence fills every space the body relinquishes to rest. This rest teaches us that spiritual vigilance is not measured by the time we remain alert or the intensity of concentration. It shows that trust in the Father's care allows us to relax without fear, yield to fatigue without guilt, and remain connected to the sacred. Every moment of sleep becomes an opportunity to experience God's presence, who embraces each fragment of our being with infinite tenderness. Even in physical weakness, prayer continues, because true spiritual vigilance arises from surrender, not absolute control. The body rests, but faith is strengthened, nourished by the silent love that flows through every heartbeat and deep breath. Understanding rest as a strengthening of faith transforms the prayer experience into something deep and continuous. Sleeping while praying ceases to be weakness and becomes an expression of trust, devotion, and silent love. The body rests, the mind slows, but the soul remains active in communion with God. Every moment of quiet surrender reinforces our connection to the Father, showing that true prayer does not rely solely on conscious effort, but on an open heart and receptivity to the divine. It is in this space of surrender and rest that faith is renewed, spiritual vigilance becomes enduring, and the rosary becomes a continuous bridge of prayer, where each gesture, yawn, and physical breath is transformed into a profound expression of devotion and trust. Jesus invited us to let the little ones come, and perhaps sleep during prayer is exactly that childlike gesture, abandoning oneself without fear in the Father's arms. Between physical rest and the surrender of the heart lies a space of deep, silent encounter, where every yawn and moment of drowsiness becomes continuous prayer. Discernment, recognizing the difference between escape and surrender, reveals that every moment of rest can also be an act of faith, and that spiritual vigilance depends not only on awake attention, but on the constant love that pulses within the soul. When we understand sleep as a form of surrender, every moment of drifting off becomes an opportunity for communion. Even asleep, we can feel the Father's presence, allowing prayer to become the soul's breath, continuous and silent. The rosary ceases to be mere repeated words and becomes a living expression of devotion and trust. Resting in the Father's arms means recognizing that true spiritual vigilance lies in the surrender of the heart, in confident abandonment, and in the assurance that He sustains us in every moment, even when all within us seems to succumb to rest. Every gesture, every yawn, every moment of sleep during prayer, when embraced consciously, transforms into an act of deep faith. It is in this silence, in this surrender, that we find true rest, intimacy with God, and the certainty that the soul's vigilance is not lost, but strengthened. Resting in the Father's arms is complete trust, allowing Him to guide what we cannot control and realizing that even physical fragility can be a path of encounter, love, and constant prayer. It is in this delicate, silent space that the soul learns to rest, to trust, and to remain awake in the heart of God.